Canada became a confederation in 1867, but even though Canada was now more independent from their mother country of Britain, they did depend on the largest empire in human history for some support. Today, I want to talk about the Naval Service Bill and the Naval Question, as it gives important insight into how Sir Wilfrid Laurier tried to make a compromise with Britain, Canadian politicians, and a very divided Canadian public. Before Confederation was even formed, maritime defense in Canada was never a real priority. Britain was responsible for naval defense, and no navy could even compete with theirs at the time. Due to the lack of a prominent threat in the Western Hemisphere, Britain saw no reason to have a navy in Canada. In the early 20th century, Britain had gotten into a naval race with the German Empire, who had built the most powerful warship of the time, the Dreadnought, and was starting to gain an edge. Britain needed funds to gain back their dominance in maritime defense, so in 1909 they asked their Dominion ministers, which included Sir Wilfrid Laurier, if they would help them financially. However, French-Canadian nationalists led by Henry Bourassa opposed any involvement in the British Navy, and the divided public led to Laurier's decision of whether to help Britain or not, being known as the Naval Question. In 1910, Laurier saw a compromise in the form of the Naval Service Bill. The bill would give Canada a Department of Naval Defense, a naval college, and a small Canadian Navy. Britain was interested, but of course they had to ask, what's in it for us? And Laurier responded by making Ottawa in charge of the Navy, but in times of war, it would be under total British control. Britain was underwhelmed by this offer, but were willing to accept any help they could get. Britain sent 2 old garage sale-esque training cruisers to Canada to get them started. But unfortunately, not everyone in Canada was happy. Remember those French-Canadian nationalists opposed to financially helping Britain in 1909? Well, they were even more against giving Britain rights to their navy during war, which they said would lead to Canada being dragged into every British-fought war. Laurier's bill was criticized by almost every group, but mostly French-Canadians. This loss of support was a main factor of Laurier's defeat in the 1911 election, as Robert Borden's Conservative Party was elected instead. Borden proposed an alternate bill that would supply Britain with cash instead of a Canadian Navy, although it was defeated in a majority Liberal Senate. During World War I, the naval question virtually disappeared, as Britain was working overtime to build ships for the war effort. With none of the Central Powers in close proximity to Canada, and the alliance between Britain and Japan, it meant Britain's Pacific interests were taken care of, and Canada didn't need to get involved with their own navy, and they could focus on their own war effort. In the end, the controversy with Canada's navy was one of those problems that seemed to just go away, as Britain never really took it over during World War I. The navy did survive, but with only 2 ships, it wasn't really seen as a threat or an asset. The naval question was a social, political, and economic dispute that led to great divide in Canada. What seemed like a small issue that could have easily been dealt with internally turned into a public discussion about Canada's independence.